Bishop Fulton Sheen says there's not 100 people in the U.S. that hate the Catholic Church, but there are millions who hate what they wrongly perceive it to be. In her attempt to evangelize a dear Catholic friend, my new guest became Catholic herself. As John Henry Newman states, to be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant. In this episode, I talk to Karlie Kincaid, a wife, mother, and Catholic content creator, as well as a convert. In this episode, we talk about her ministry online, her mission, as well as what it means to be a wife and mother, and her conversion story. She has a wealth of knowledge. I recommend giving her a follow at Kindred in Kairos. Again, that's Kindred in Kairos. And if you want to follow along this page, do so at Words with Ward Show on Instagram. Again, that's Words with Ward Show. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoyed recording it. This is the Words with Ward Show. I'm your host, Tyler Ward. Karlie, thank you for being on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Absolutely. I told you a little bit off screen, I'm nervous for this one because I've only interviewed people that I've known so far, and we've only had like a short conversation on the phones. Before we get too far into it, I know you have a brand that I want to talk a lot about, but before we get into that, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Karlie Kincaid. I'm a Catholic convert, wife and mother of two small children. I live in Alabama, but I'm from Texas originally. So I was born and raised there. So I'm not an Alabama native. I'm from Texas originally, but I've brought all of my pride to Alabama, and now I'm very proud to live in Alabama as well. And I'm rubbing off on them, I hope. All that pride.
Well, I'll give you a pass on the Alabama thing. You should probably come back to Texas. Proud native Texan here, and don't want to leave.
I thought the same thing until I met my husband. I was like, I may go off for like a year or so, but I'll always come back to Texas. And my parents were pretty confident that was going to happen too. But
never say never. You're still really young, so
that's true. I could always make my way back.
Maybe we can convince your husband to come back. Well, we'll probably get into that a little bit today too. But you mentioned you're a Catholic convert. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was born and raised as a Christian. I was a Protestant. And it wasn't until after college when I started my first job in Dallas that I met a girl that I was working with. And we became friends. And I basically found out through a random conversation that she was a Catholic. And I really didn't know very many Catholics. I just had a few preconceived notions about what they believed. And so I asked her kind of my list of questions that I asked all the Catholics that I met, and she gave me some really good answers that I couldn't respond to because I didn't know enough about Catholicism at the time to be able to even have like a good formed response. So we had like a 3-hour long conversation. So we did talk about a lot, but it sparked just enough curiosity and the desire to convert her inside of my heart that, I took off like a racehorse and researched everything that I could about the faith with the sole intent to convert her. And through that process, I found myself, drawn to the church, and ultimately I'm the one who converted. Of course, she walked away from that conversation going, yes, got her. So
I've always told people, if you want to be a better Catholic, you have to find a Protestant friend because they'll challenge you.
Absolutely.
And then you got to find the answers. That's what happened to me for most of my life. Started a little bit off in high school, like being told that I was going to go to hell, that I wasn't a Christian. And then that carried over even to some of my best friends in college. To this day, they don't hold that view anymore. But like when they first encountered a Catholic, unfortunately, the Catholics that they encountered so far weren't very well catechized, or were Catholic by name and not by practice. Because they do have a lot of that cultural element to Catholicism.
Yes. And in Christianity in general, you'll find a lot of Christians who know, but I would say, like, for Protestantism, everything is almost everything, and almost everyone simplifies things. And
Yeah,
the simple way of viewing and explaining things is a lot easier to say back. And Catholicism is very rich and deep. So it's not quite as easy to regurgitate a one sentence of, why are you, it's harder to defend because it's more complex and it's more rich.
it goes beyond just like what would typically be discussed as like the relationship, and that kind of ends the conversation. I feel like with most Protestants, and
Exactly.
yeah, you mentioned the 3 hour long conversations, and I laugh because there's no typically when like a Protestant comes up to me and like tries to demand a question or an answer from something, they expect like me to throw a Bible verse at them, or really for me to be stumped. But if I do answer, to throw a Bible verse at them, you're going to get a Bible verse, you're going to get some early church fathers, you're going to get the Catechism, you're going to get 2,000 plus years of church history. So these large theological debates can't really be answered in these very simple terms. But I don't think that's a weakness either. So
No,
when
yeah, I
you
don't
when you
either.
said you went up to her with these list of questions you ask Catholics, was this out of pure curiosity, or was this mainly an approach of like, I need to evangelize these people?
Well, it was more like I would lean towards the latter of, like, well, how are you Catholic if this is what your church is teaching? And then I would say, how worshiping Mary as an example. That's like always the easiest one, always the one that is most approached. And she was like, well, the church doesn't teach that. And then I'd be like, well, what does the church teach then? Or like, what are you doing then? And then she would explain it. And I'd be like, okay, well then why do you do this? And I would kind of dig into, I probably asked with every one of those, you're worshiping Mary kind of misconceptions. I would ask probably three or four questions following. I had enough information there and had enough exposure to be able to do that, but I couldn't get further than that. And so then I'd hop to the next subject, which is what Protestants often do, which is, okay, you kind of covered that one sort of, and I can't really go anywhere else with that. Okay, so now let me jump to purgatory. Now let me jump to, the Pope and the authority, or the corruption within the church's history. And she really just knocked down every single one of them to the third question that I had. And so I was like, okay, I'm out of topics. Now I need to go do my research and figure out how you're wrong, how you could possibly be wrong, because you cannot be right. So,
That's awesome. And unless I'm mistaken, this lady had like a theology degree of some sort. That just goes to show the importance of being properly catechized and being strong in your faith, because we are all witnesses to it.
yeah, no, she's like me. She's in software sales and has a full-time job, and she has children, and she definitely doesn't have her master's or anything. She didn't do any kind of like higher education and understanding and being able to do Catholic apologetics or anything like that. She's just a normal person who had great parents and had a wonderful Catholic formation. And a lot of her answers are very simplified. They're very much like person to person conversational. She doesn't get, really into a lot of the teachings. She's not spitting out Bible verses. It's very much just how you would really talk to another person about any other topics. She's very logical, and in a lot of her answers are very, as much as you can within Catholicism, very stripped down into the basics, which is one of the reasons why she has converted through her life so many people. Is one, she doesn't, she's not out on the streets like yelling at people, right? It's like, I had already in a short period of time such a relationship with her that I was invested because I liked her and I wanted to save her soul. And
Yeah.
that was really the basis of it. It wasn't like a head to head debate where I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong because you're on the opposite side. It was more like, I love you and I care about you and I don't want you to go to hell. And so I need to save you. In just the same way that, that we should, care about each other and bring people into Christianity in general, is because we don't want them, we want salvation for them. We want them to be in heaven with us. It was still out of that, but it was really, she catches you by being a generally good and likable person and building that relationship with you. And then you find out that she's Catholic, or she'll let you know that she's Catholic in some kind of like, side way. And then she has a lot of people who are like me, either very full on debaters or that are just genuinely curious and have no exposure. And then she's like, she'll just answer their questions. She calls it planting seeds. I know a lot of people do. She just plants little seeds along the way. But over her life, she's the same age as me, so she's like 30. She's probably converted over a dozen people.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So she's
That's awesome. No, it's great to realize how love is the predecessor defining the greatest of all love, and it's like how she treated you, so it allowed you to have that one foot in the door. So you started researching, you converted. I've often found, even with people converting, there tends to be like a transition period where like they believe everything, but they're still like stuck on certain things, or like some things are hard. So, for example, the saints. For some people, like finally taking that step and having intercessory prayers to the saints tends to be difficult. Did you have any of those? Like, what was the hard part for you?
It wasn't one particular thing that was holding me back, but it was one thing that propelled me forward. I actually went to Easter with her. She's from Denver and she lives there now. And we went to visit her family and spend the Easter weekend with them. I went to church with them. I had questions that I wanted to ask them because I knew that that's where she got most of her education from. Because, of course, like good parents, they didn't rely on her education to form her Catholic formation. They taught her a lot of what she knows personally in the home. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to ask your parents. Like, I know that her dad was a lot more rich in his sources and his, the things that he could share with me that I could go and then read than she was even. And so when I got there, I asked them all my questions. It was great, had a wonderful weekend. And her grandmother came over for dinner one night and I was telling her my whole story. I told her what I had done, what I thought, and how, it had been wrong, and the 6 or 7 misconceptions that I had about the faith that had been knocked down entirely. And she hit me with the line, well, what are you waiting for? Why don't you just convert? Why don't you start, at the time it was called RCIA, now OCIA.
Yeah.
Why don't you just start your conversion process? And I was shocked by her question. And I was like, well, I still have X, Y, and Z that I still need to fully research and I'm not fully sold on. And, I still had these burning things in my mind that hadn't quite come together for me. And they were all small. They were all little. It wasn't like the Eucharist or something massive. And she was like, okay, well, they've already refuted you 6 or 7 times. Like, when are you going to stop making yourself the highest authority? And when are you going to realize that you don't know everything? And you could very well spend your entire life. She's like, you've only scratched the surface, Karlie. And it was a very humbling moment for me of like, you've only scratched the surface. The more that you dive in, the more probably confused that you will be on certain things, and then the more clarity that you'll get on other things. But you could spend your entire life doing this, having the questions, going and seeking the answers, finding more questions or finding more things that you have to reconcile, the differences between either how you were raised or how you naturally think, or the sin that you deal with, the crosses that you bear with what the church teaches. So she's like, do you want to participate? How does it feel when you go up there and you have to receive a blessing and you can't partake in the Eucharist? I was like, well, it feels really bad. I'd really like to do that. I'd really love to be in full communion with the church. And she kind of just pointed out that I was being a bit hypocritical and that there was a highest authority in my life, but it was really me instead of the church.
I think it was Jung who said that everyone has a God, and it's whatever they place at the highest of their hierarchy. And a lot of times, not all the times, this would be disingenuous to say this about all Protestants, but a lot of times that is the logical conclusion of Protestantism is people become their own God, especially with like sola scriptura and things of that nature. I started smiling immediately when you mentioned like just a grandmother walking in there, because they have that like simple infinite wisdom of just like, why don't you just do it? And then it's that final little push that you need.
And they also just cut it to you straight. I mean,
They
she
do.
was
They
just
do.
like, "What are you waiting on?" And I was like, "What am I waiting on?" Honestly, that's a really good question that I hadn't thought about. Just because you get, and I know a lot of Protestants who are exploring any Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox, anything related to that. They're very much in the researching phase for a very long time,
Yeah.
and they just get really hung up on these tiny little things that they cannot reconcile in their brains. And I would say it's probably one of the most common things that I get from people reaching out to me on social media is just like, well, I'm still hung up on this. Well, I'm still hung up on this. And I give them the same piece of advice that she gave me because it pushed me over the edge and made me realize what exactly that I was doing.
I think that's a trap that even a lot of Catholics fall into, and I've seen it a lot with like young men my age. Of like they want to like know like the logical conclusion of why they believe what they've always been told to believe, and they get really really into it. And that was definitely me for a while. Um, and then eventually I realized I was falling into the same trap that I was arguing against of placing myself as the highest authority. And I think it was when Bishop Robert Barron, I was listening to him one time, he said that faith is not a leap, but it's rather a small step in with something you cannot prove because of its congruence with something of which you can. So we have all this knowledge about God that we can prove, but there's going to be those tiny little things which we can't prove, but we know that it's true because of the congruence of the other things. So if something seems unloving and we know that that's not congruent with God, that's probably not a step we can go take. But if something is being taught that sounds loving and we know that God's all loving, then it's an easier step to take. So that's just a small example.
Yeah, and even with like the quote unquote buffet Catholics, as they're
Yeah,
known, where they're just like picking and choosing different teachings that they believe in and practice, there's nothing that says that you need to blindly just like in your mind just submit to whatever the church is teaching and then and just not question it. The church loves asking questions and understands that you will have contradictions in your mind over how you feel or what you think versus what the church teaches, and it loves that we explore that. They want us to have the continued pursuit to bring those two opposing ideas together,
yeah,
no matter how long that takes. But just saying, like, oh, well, I don't agree with the church on that, and leaving it at that is not okay. Like, you need to constantly be in pursuit of reconciling those differences and trying to understand where the church is coming from, what it's rooted in, and all of that.
absolutely. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand too is the different levels of authority in which the church speaks. I mean, papal infallibility is heavily misunderstood even by most Catholics. And then you have, the opposite of that spectrum with like sedevacantists, and you get down that trap. But one last question regarding your conversion. Was there any like trouble with the parents? Were they like super pro Protestant or were they kind of more on the fence or what was that like?
Yeah, they definitely weren't happy about it, and I met some resistance, especially in the beginning when I told them that I was. Uh, I don't think I really told them until I had started RCIA and started the conversion process. But during that process, which is pretty lengthy, it's not a month or whatever. It's a pretty lengthy period of time. And during that process, as I was going through RCIA, they specifically my dad would try to refute the Catholic's teachings of saying like, oh well, what are you learning in RCIA? And then try to like do the opposite and erase
Yeah.
everything that I had learned and kind of pull me back. And so there was a little bit of that, a little bit of like the debate and the trying to, because I'm a debater from a family of debaters, that's just kind of how we are, which is beautiful. And I love that, but it wasn't what I needed at the time because everything that he was saying was what I already knew, was what I had already grown up with that. And so it didn't really feel like I was at a point where I was able to have that debate because I wasn't educated on the other side. I couldn't do what my friend had done and give a good response because I was still forming my response. And so it wasn't really healthy for me at the time. I was like, I already know that, but I'm trying to decipher that for myself. And so with a little bit of back and forth, ultimately he kind of stopped debating as much and more so just accepted that I was going to figure it out for myself. And ultimately I did, and I chose Catholicism. And once I decided what I was going to do and communicated that to them, then they were like, okay, well, we will support you in that decision. And they came to my confirmation, and
That's nice.
at the end, that, my dad was even like, that was beautiful, loved the homily, like he still was present and involved and active and supportive, and very much like, I still don't believe that, but I am understanding why you're here. And then that has really progressed throughout time, especially as I've grown, really strong and being able to defend the faith. They'll ask me questions now, and sometimes it will get into a little bit of a debate style, but most of the time they'll just ask me the question of, what does the church teach? And then I'll just give them the teaching. And they may say, oh, well, this is what we believe. And I say, I know what you believe. You raised me, And so there's a little bit of that, and sometimes we will go a little back and forth on it. And those are great conversations now. And they're always, very, very easy and smooth, and really, as we have always debated in our family about other topics, really healthy. But they'll do it pretty much every time I see them. And it's really awesome because I've seen their hearts really soften to Catholicism and come to view it as beautiful. They'll go to church with me whenever I'm there, at least one of them. And so they're a lot more open than they used to be. It was tough for a little while, but it's come a long way.
Well, the way you said that your family is like a debating family makes me feel like someone in there has to be a lawyer or something, if that's the case.
No lawyers. We did have one who wanted to be a lawyer, but no lawyers yet.
Okay. Well, I get from your page, and we'll talk about that a little bit, I get from it that you're probably not easy to convince, and especially not when you have your mind set up. So whenever I saw one of your latest posts, I think was, you used to be like the biggest Catholic hater or something like that. I imagine there's probably a lot of growing pains when it came to that conversion, but
there was a lot. I was quite aggressive. I would say, like, when I'm starting to feel either convicted or I have been convicted in the past and I have come to an insight, I'm so passionate about specifically these kinds of topics where we are talking about our eternal life, and it's a big thing. It's the most important thing in our lives. So of course I'm very passionate about it, as should we all be, but I have a very hard time toning that down. And so anyone around me is usually feeling that. My husband will tell you that too. It's a beautiful thing, but it is one of my crosses to bear, to make sure that I'm always doing it out of a place of love and where people feel that they're able to share their feelings too.
Absolutely. I understand that as well. I'm a little bit of the same way. So my family typically tells me, hey, maybe calm down.
Yeah, calm it down. Take it down one notch. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just passionate. So we talked about, you have a platform. It's in Greek, so I might butcher it. I think it's Greek, right?
Yeah, you can.
Kindred and Kyrios, right?
There's a couple of ways to pronounce it. Kindred and Kairos is usually what
Kairos. Okay. I know a little bit more Latin than I do my Greek. I need to work on that, but
a lot of it, people will also pronounce it Kairos too. Both are accepted.
Kairos? Well, that's quite the alliteration, given your name's Karlie Kincaid, so that has to be somewhat intentional.
Yes. I was like, this is just nice. Rolls off the tongue.
So tell us a little bit about that and how you got started with that.
Yes, so it's come a long way too. It's been an evolving thing, my social media. I have an Instagram and a TikTok. Started with Instagram, and really the purpose of it originally was because I wanted to quit my full-time job that I'm in still currently right now and spend more time with my children. A lot of young mothers in general, explore this avenue. A lot of people have been able to make it work and spend more time with their family and not completely leave the entire kind of providing and financial side just to the husband. The economy is tough to be a one income household. So anything that you can do that helps is great. And so that's our ultimate goal as a family, is for me to be able to stay home and raise our children and hopefully homeschool them, at least for a period of time. And so that was why I started my social media, was to build a secondary income stream. And so with that, I got a lot of advice about what to do and what not to do. And I just kind of wanted to share my life and the things that I did in my home and the things that I was cooking, my recipes, the products that I was using. I'm pretty into kind of like the non-toxic, holistic, natural side of things in my household. And so that was kind of what I focused on, was being a Christian mom who was trying to make, a holy and healthy home for my family. And that was what I shared. But it very quickly, I found out that just talking about what I was cooking that week was not my passion. It was not what I most wanted to talk about. It wasn't the kinds of conversations that I was having with my husband or my friends that I was really wanting to discuss. And I think that everyone, including myself and my friends and my family and my audience, could tell that, right? It didn't seem different or unique or truly maybe authentic to me. And so I pivoted and I started thinking to myself, well, what is it that I really care about? What is it that really drives me and motivates me and that I'm very, very passionate about? And that's really where we changed completely changed my whole brand and renamed Kindred and Kairos and started talking about the things that I cared about most, which was Catholicism specifically. So I kind of moved from just Christianity in general and trying to appeal to all Christian people and all Christian mothers. And I didn't want to isolate anybody, because if you do that, then some brands won't want to work with you or some people won't want to follow you. I tossed that out the window and I said, I really don't care anymore, because this feels a little disingenuous to me, because what I'm really passionate about is helping people understand what Catholicism really is, what the Catholic Church really teaches, and help people like who I used to be understand the misconceptions and understand how they can defend their faith. And then I'm very passionate about the pro-life movement, and I have been for really my whole life. It's a very controversial topic amongst a lot of people these days. Shouldn't be, but it is. So I was like, why would I shy away from that? I'm so passionate about it. I love talking about it. Why would I not talk about it here? And so I started talking about it. And I started talking about what parenthood, what motherhood, what being a wife, what really men and women on our roles and what all of that really looks like, because I'm very passionate about those things. Those things also happen to be very controversial. So all of the things that I'm really passionate about are not for the entire world. And I found out really quickly that was going to limit my ability to make money on social media. But I also found out that I really didn't care. Yeah. And that if I was just going to be doing social media to make money, that I was putting money higher above God, above the purpose that God has given me in my life, above the gifts that He has given me. I do believe being passionate about things and being able to communicate about these things is a gift. And so I was throwing all of that away for money alone. It was taking time. It was still taking time away from my family. It still takes time to do all of those things. And so that was when everything really shifted for me.
Yeah.
Ironically, it was also when my page started getting a lot more traction. You could tell, right? Like people, it was obvious that I was passionate about this, that I cared, and that I was educated on these topics, and that I was convicted. And so, yeah, it was really funny how that happened around the exact same time.
Absolutely. No, I love that. One of the things that you mentioned was, that transitional period. And that's why I tell people a lot of times, you don't got to start off right. As long as you consistently pray without ceasing, you can re-anchor something that you're already previously doing. And that would make all the difference. You don't just got to throw the baby out with the bathwater and change everything completely. A lot of times it's just, how are you orienting your heart towards the highest aim that makes the difference? So you touched on a lot of different stuff there that I want to talk on, specifically, the men and women roles, the pro-life. But the first thing you mentioned was, this being an extra way of making income, an extra stream of income. And I was actually going to talk to you about that, because that kind of goes with the men and women roles and how you kind of see those. And I'll leave that kind of up in the air for you to talk about. Where do you see the main troubles with that in society right now? How do you balance that? Because I've seen the option of women going into the workforce has now become an obligation,
Hmm.
because of, put them in the workforce. There's more people to tax now. People know that there's a two-income household. Individuals don't get paid as much as they would otherwise because they experience that, and it's almost become a necessity for a lot of people. But I'm under the impression, and this isn't a popular opinion, that someone needs to be home, and that role is typically best suited with the characteristics that women have. But what are your thoughts on that as someone who's working, who has kids?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It was kind of really easy for us when Chase and I first were discerning marriage and we were dating seriously. We talked about these kinds of things. I think it's really important to do, but we talked about it, and it was really obvious that we were very much on the same page, that we did want to fall more into the traditional roles, and that we wanted to do that in a way that honored our gifts. I am, and we're very stereotypical. I'm more of a nurturer, and he is more of the protector and provider. I think that's like pretty common. That's like when it boils down to it, like that's pretty, I'm sure there are exceptions. And I think, everything should be discerned between each couple, but I feel like that's pretty much how it goes. And that's really how we were designed. And that's why it is so common that that is the case. But when we did that, we wanted to say, okay, and even though I am working, we still fall under this right now. So he is the one who is chasing career progression and planning his career with the future in mind. At my job, they'll ask me all the time, well, what's your next move? What's your next goal? Do you want to go into leadership? Do you want to do this? Because, that's always part of it. And I have told them, I said, my goal is an exit strategy. And I've always been very upfront and honest with them. I plan for my promotion to be stay-at-home mom, where I'm raising my children and I'm educating them. And that is my goal. And if you'd like me to help me get there, then you can help me make as much money as I can here so then I can quit sooner. And my manager has been so supportive of that. So I'm very, very blessed by having a good manager who respects my decisions and my goals there. But that's always how we've oriented it from the moment that we got married, from the moment that we started having kids, was you're chasing our future of in the career sense and the provider sense, and I'm really sticking here so that we can formulate a good plan for how we can get there and how we can get there successfully. My job is still very flexible, so I'm with my kids for about half of the day. So right now we don't take them to daycare or anything like that. We are so blessed to have somebody come into our home and spend a couple of hours with them a day while I'm working, and then I get the rest of the day with them. So we're still able to have a really good balance, and they're little. So, but our plan is whenever they're moving towards formal education, that's when I'll quit my job and then start doing kind of the educator role. As I mentioned earlier, with my friend who helped in my conversion, her parents were very, very involved in her education and in raising her, and not just from a faith formation sense, but everything else, right? They educated on all things. And they firmly believed that education starts and is strongest in the home, and anything else is really kind of secondary. And that's the principle that I have, is it's my job to teach my children. It is not the government's job to teach my children. It is not a private school's job to teach my children. It's not even just the Catholic Church's job to teach my children. It's mine. That is the responsibility that I hold. And of course my husband helps me with that, but that's kind of the role that we're putting me in, is educating our children. And so I think, I think the real world has really made it very, very hard for that to be an option. And you have to be very, very intentional to make your lives do that. There's a lot of sacrifice that has to happen. There's a lot of planning and thinking. And luckily, the community that I've surrounded myself really fosters that. So I have three of my closest friends are stay-at-home moms. And so we all can talk about and help each other with, how do we actually do this? How do we live in this economy in today's day where things are more expensive? Because that's the number one thing that people bring up, is like, how do you even do this? I want to do this, but how? And that's where you lean on the community that you're building. And that's, where you get ideas from other people. How do you budget your grocery your weekly groceries bills. Like, what do you guys do? How do y'all save money? How are you doing this? And really, that's a good way to help each other out to make it possible. Because I think a lot of people want to do this, but they don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned so many things I want to touch on. One was a lot of people wanting to do it. I think that's true. I also think for such a long time now, too, women have been lied to that the only way for them to have value is for them to be like a man and and take on those masculine roles. So I also think there's a large majority of women out there that claim that's not what they want to do, and that they want to go kind of be this like this boss lady.
Boss babe.
But yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of studies out there too. Like by the time you're in your 30s and you've reached that status, if you do happen to reach that status, because you're also convincing yourself that you're on the upper echelons to achieve something like that, even though very few people do, anyways. Which is funny to think about. But if you do achieve that status, you get to being in your mid 30s, and whether or not you achieved of it, there's something lacking there. And people have asked me too, like, do you think that having that desire for a career is bad? And I'm like, not necessarily. I don't think that should be the main desire. But I also don't think that should be the main desire for a husband and father either. It should be towards God first and foremost, and then towards the spouses and then the children. There's that hierarchy of order. You mentioned that there is this inclination that women and men typically have to do certain roles. I mean, I just got out of college, and plenty of professors told me that's because we impose those on them. But that couldn't be anything further from the truth. I mean, this is fairly anecdotal, but I have two nieces that I absolutely adore. I'm their godfather, and I have the privilege of hanging around them most of the time. And neither my mom or my sister-in-law or really any of the women in my family are, like take on this like movie-esque feminine role. Like they're not carrying on purses or putting on exorbitant amount of makeup or anything like that. But there's this inclination towards those behaviors for my nieces. Really one of my nieces, because the other one's too young to be doing any of that. Of wanting to carry a purse around and put on fake makeup and things of that nature. So kids definitely do have those inclinations to doing those things.
Yeah, and I think those are kind of like a lot of times in this is a little controversial too, but whenever you see anyone who has makeup on, right, then you think of being a female, being a woman, or a dress, or long hair, or whatever. Those are feminine things, but it is not what makes a woman, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a big distinction between dressing up like something and then having the natural instincts of a woman.
Absolutely.
And I think those things cannot be confused because you
No,
can
no.
be a girl who likes to wear jeans and a t-shirt and hates wearing dresses, and you could still beautifully exemplify what it means to be a woman and what it means to like fill that role. I think there's a lot of confusion today about what it truly means and how you can't just dress up, right, as a
I'm glad
particular.
you kind of called me out. That was a poor example on my behalf.
I know what you were saying, but
Yeah,
it's just
my
something
nieces
that
have
you
done
see
the
a lot.
similar thing with like baby dolls and like nurturing them and seeing
Yes.
that, and they have these very motherly instincts. Or like me or my brother get back from like a long run, and it was a tough run. We get back, we're obviously like in some sort of agonizing pain from the run, which is a little dramatic, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And it's that
Caretakers.
it's that tending to the needs and being nurturing and things like that. So
And I think
absolutely,
it
I'm
just
glad you
brings,
kind
yeah,
of
it brings up
pointed
such
that
a
out.
good point of like what that those are really natural to women from day one, right? Like nobody is teaching that 2-year-old, hey, you're the woman, so you need to go check on your uncle, right?
Yeah,
Nobody is telling her to do that. She's not watching a show or a TV or society, or nobody's pressuring her into those things. Somebody could very easily pressure her into wearing a dress or putting on makeup. She could have a lot of societal pressures around those things, but there is no societal pressure on the natural instincts of caring and nurturing and taking care of people. And that's like, that to me just says it all. It's like you watch any young children, boys and girls, and it will become plain as day the differences between men and women.
Yeah. I mean, you can see it in how they play at the end of the day. And you mentioned homeschooling. While many people can pressure a little girl to put on a dress too, there's also plenty of people trying to pressure little boys to put on dresses, and that typically happens in the public schooling system. Um, so, what would you tell someone who's like homeschooling is, their kids are going to end up weird, or maybe I'm not talented or smart enough to homeschool my kids? What would you say that?
Those are two very different questions. I think for the first one of are they going to be weird? I think if you look at the children who are in public schools today, I think that's weird. Right? Like, I think it's weird to think that you're a dog and to go around the mall with a tail out of your jeans. I think that's really strange behavior, and it's very prevalent in the public school system. I think there's a lot of weird things that go on there. And so, if I want my children to look different, I think the weirdness, right, comes from how we were raised when there were homeschool children that were different, that didn't know how to socialize. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do. One of them is having a good community around you. Just because I homeschool doesn't mean that my children are going to be alone all day. Like they're not just going to be with me, but from meeting now as a Catholic, I've met more homeschooled adults that were homeschooled as children, and I never would have known. One of my very best friends was homeschooled up until high school, and I would have never guessed it. Because she's just like me. She's probably more social than me. She's probably better in social situations than I am, and you would have never known. And her husband was homeschooled. Never would have known, right? Like, so I think it's people are always thinking of the one example in their head of that one weird person that they knew who happened to be homeschool. And sure, there are, but if you're a weird parent, then you might have a weird kid, whether they're in the public school system or whether they're not. And I think maybe weird is probably the wrong word, more just like socially awkward. But if you are a adult that has absolutely no issues in social situations, then your children aren't either. And if you have a good community to help socialize them in, then you don't really have to worry about that. And then the
I
second,
have seen that.
yeah,
I have seen that before you get in the second one. I like noting many people who've been homeschooled, and at first there's this strangeness about them, but then you do some reflecting, and you're like, no, I'm probably the strange one for thinking this behavior is strange. And if like most of society is acting a certain way, and I mean this is the purpose of the church, is to be countercultural in many ways. So when these kids are coming out, they're kind of countercultural. It looks strange, just as like the church might look strange, but oftentimes they're kind of on a better path that I found. And people have made these arguments like people need to be exposed to certain things and they're going to deal with it in life. I think it's a weak argument. I don't think many people in the professional setting are going to be encountering those with foxtails, dressing up like that. I don't think that you should surround yourself with people like that. So even if that is something you frequently encounter, I don't think it's going to happen. And also, we're confusing that like kids need to have those experiences way too early than necessary.
and there's the idea that exposure will somehow help you manage it more, but I call that being desensitized.
Yeah, it's decent.
It's
Yeah,
not
that's what I'm getting
helping you. It's not helping you, especially if you don't want them to end up, being or believing or living that way,
at.
which is confused, right? You don't want them to be confused people or depressed people or have anxiety, which like so many of the world is one of those things. If you don't want them to be like that, the best way to help them not be like that is not to expose them to it and to desensitize them and make them feel like it's normal. It's to actually show them how to combat that, which I think is through educating them on what you should be rooted in, which for us, that is the faith.
Yeah.
And they're
And
not
the
going to
problem
find
with desensitization too is it tends to lead to either a desire or a willingness to explore even more extreme things, and either more like fetish type behavior. We've seen that with like pornography being in recent years too. Is like people get desensitized to that, so they just get increasingly more vulgar.
and they also
And that
let
happens.
they let their boundaries go, right? If you're exposed to a lot of things, then you're willing to let people push you past and press on those boundaries that you wouldn't normally. If you're not exposed to it, you are going to call out anything that you deem as unnecessary and hurtful and harmful to you. And it's going to be shocking to you. It's going to be so shocking that you stop. That's not okay. Whereas if you see it all the time, people are going to push that even further, and you're going to accept more and more and more until you're one of those people who are seeing harm done on the streets and you do nothing to stop it, because you've already seen so much happen that you're like, it just, that's literally the nature of it.
Yeah. I know a lot of kids my age are just kind of becoming numb to a lot of things that they see on the news because we've been seeing it ever since we were children, which is pretty sad. You were going to mention the second thing I mentioned. I didn't let you answer it yet, but I'll reiterate it. It was, what would you tell, whether it's a husband or a wife, what would you tell them if they were like, I'm not talented enough or smart enough to homeschool my kid?
Yeah, there's lots of resources, right? Like it's not all on your shoulders to do. I think there's a homeschool group, there's co-ops, there's lots of resources, there's full courses, right, that you will purchase. It's not like you're sitting down with them and it all comes out of your brain. A lot of these courses do help you in that. And I've talked a lot with homeschool mothers who are doing this, who felt the same way. And they said, you learn along with them. And if you don't know something or you don't feel comfortable doing something, then go and figure out what it is that you need to learn. And also, whenever you decide to homeschool, and for me too, you don't have to commit to homeschooling K through 12. I feel very comfortable with the younger years, and this may change. My mind may change as we go through, but I don't have to commit to teaching 10th and 12th grade subjects to my children right now. And you don't even have to ever commit to it. One of my best friends, she did the younger years all the way through junior high. And then when she got to high school, they moved her into the private school system. So it's not like all or nothing. And you do have the ability to just try it out. Like you could try it for 1 year. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you. But I would say, like, I used to feel those same things of, oh, I just don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I have enough patience. I don't know if I am capable of doing that. And after speaking to enough people who are just like, quit cutting yourself short.
Yeah.
You are very capable, and you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to do it without resources. There's an abundance of resources out there for us. We have more access and information as a society than we ever have that are fully open to our society. There is no actual limits to what we can.
And maybe you're not inclined to teach an entire classroom. Maybe that's like not the amount of patience you're naturally born with. And I think that's oftentimes what we confuse like teacher's education with, is like a lot of those that go and start teaching elementary school or kind of in that introductory level, they're not getting taught the ABCs again and making sure that they have it really honed in to teach their kids. They're learning how to teach.
Right.
And they're learning how to do that to a wide classroom. And most of that is simple down to, how do you make a connection with all these kids? But if you're a parent, you know your kids quite well, or at least you should, and you know how to connect with them and teach them.
Yeah, the information is in the books themselves. The information is in the courses and the texts, in the things that you will purchase as a homeschool mom. It's really just your job to do the teaching and the formation and to help them walk through it. Which, you teach your kids. Yeah, you teach your kids how to talk. You teach them how to eat. You teach them all of the basic questions that they ask you on a day-to-day basis. You teach them all the time about way bigger and more important things than algebra.
And of course, as you get further down the road in school, like you mentioned, the technique of the teaching becomes a little bit more important, or like just not the technique, but rather like the knowledge of the subject might become a little bit more important.
For sure.
Because we can't be masters in all of it, although I have seen some people be really close.
Yes. But you do have to be intentional, I will say. You can't just be a homeschool parent who's like, yep, we're going to stay home and we're going to read a book. And you do have to be intentional with all of your children's education and formation. You do have to be very purposeful, I believe. You can't just be laissez-faire, they'll figure it out, because that's not how education works. So, you do see some homeschoolers like that where it's not intentional. It's not thought out. They don't have any courses. They're not really looking into anything. And I would say like that's not really setting them up for success.
I'm kind of glad you used the terminology like laissez-faire because I was going to ask you, as they get older, would you be debating public school or more Catholic education? Because I've seen even some really faithful Catholics starting to scrutinize Catholic education because they have taken that laissez-faire approach. And again, it's kind of just like Catholic by name, or they might go to mass once a week as a class, but they're not necessarily getting taught the most rigorous and traditional Catholic education.
Yeah, I think and this is, I think, all dependent on where you live and the specific schools that you have around you, public and private. I think you do have to do a lot of digging into what the school system's like, what they're actually teaching, things like that. For us here, I live in a college town, so we have a university here, which typically breeds really good public schools. So there will be some discernment about whether we choose public or private. We have a really great private school, Christian private school that my husband went to in his years growing up. And then we just started a Catholic school probably, I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. And that's the parish that we go to. And we know and we love all the teachers and people there. So we're going to have a big decision to make if and when that time comes. And I think there's a lot of things at play there. And it's going to be different for where you are location wise. Also, I mean, financially, that's a big deciding factor because they cost different things. So yeah, I mean, there's lots to look at.
Yeah, it's a more nuanced answer there. We'll talk about pro-life before we move on too much, because that's one of your pillars you mentioned that you discuss. That's a big topic. It's a heavy topic. What got you interested in doing that, if you don't mind me asking?
Like I mentioned, I've been really passionate about this subject for a very long time, and I think it's just because I grew up in a very small town, a very sheltered area where it kind of goes really along with what we were just talking about with the desensitive. How do you even say that word?
Desensitization, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Of things where it's like everybody that I grew up with knew that abortion was wrong, and it was
Mm-hmm.
it was like obvious to us all. It was just of course that's a baby, and of course like it would be awful to kill that baby, and that's murder, right? It was just plain as day. Everyone agreed with you. And then when I got to college, I found out that that was actually not the case. That there were an alarming number of people who felt differently. And it shocked me. It was something that I really had never been exposed to before. And if you've spent a lot of time having pro-life conversations in that world, you'll realize that some people are they try to be logical with their arguments, or they try to be scientific about it. And some people there's something else going on. And there's like a true like evil
Yeah.
in this debate where people are being, everything that comes out of them is just very hateful, and there's no logic behind it. There's just a lot of harm that is coming out of their mouth. And
Yeah.
to me that was the most shocking. And then also, this is a group of people that cannot speak for themselves. Being somebody who is very passionate and who is very vocal and who's never been afraid to use my voice, when I see really the only group of people who aren't able to speak for themselves, I feel that it's somebody's job to speak for them. And I feel like it's mine because it's just something that really touches my heart. And in almost every conversation that I have, I'm almost moved to tears by some of the things that I'm feeling with my own conviction, and then some of the things that I'm hearing from others. It's just something that I've always naturally felt really deeply about. Now that I have children, it's only gotten more intense because I know what it's like to be pregnant. I know what it's like to be like, this is definitely not my body. This is definitely somebody else's body. It's amazing to sing to your baby when they're in your womb, and to hear them jump or kick or move around and react to your voice. I mean, I could cry right now just because it's so moving, and it's just so weird to me because it's so obvious to me that it's a living human being that you're.
You're like, I wouldn't be kicking my stomach right now.
Yeah. But yeah,
That was good.
it's just something
That's
I've
so
always
cool.
been very passionate about, and it just continues to grow as I become a mother and I really understand and feel what it's like to go through those processes.
Yeah, I saw that shift going to college too. So when I was in high school, it was not so much that like everyone was pro-life. I didn't really experience that. There was definitely some people there that were what they called pro-choice. I don't like the terminology because I think it's a euphemism for a greater evil, but they were more rational about it in terms of like recognizing it was a wrongful act, but then giving exceptions to it. And that was a much easier thing to debate.
Yes.
They could at least lay down the fact that they agreed it was at the most basic thing, killing a baby. And then they tried to rationalize it on the other end based off situations the mother faced and things of that nature. That was easy to debate. But then I got to college, and there was, like you were saying, there was a lot of this more, what seemed to just be evil motivation, where they weren't even denying it anymore, but they were admitting to it and they didn't care. There was no exception to the rule. It was anytime, anywhere, any place. And I was shocked, and for a while, I didn't know where to go with that, other than just dusting them off like my metaphorical sandal. There, I was just like, I don't know what to do with that. How do you?
Happened, I think it happened around the same time as some of the kind of political polarization um, that has been happening basically since I was in college. I think it got more political as a topic. I think the left really adopted it as their own and kind of it as a voting policy, and in turn, when that happens, the other side automatically kind of has their side too. It That polarization that has really taken place put it on one side, and I don't want to get too political here, but a lot of things that have happened with this polarization of the two parties is anything that's on that side is completely adopted, whether it's logical, whether it's believable, whether it's not. And so I think you had more people be more vocal about it, but not have the arguments to back it in the way that they used to, where it was exceptions, it was really thinking through, and it was all, and at that point, really about the suffering that is taking place and the lack of consent and things like that. And then you had people say, well, we can't really just rely on that anymore. We have to just adopt it regardless. And also, you kind of did away with this whole like wage gap thing for women, and women didn't really have a right to attach themselves to. The feminist movement didn't really have anything to hold on to anymore because the wage gap was kind of debunked as like that's not really a thing. It's based on these other things. And so they were like, okay, that's not really working anymore. We need to adopt something. And abortion was a really easy choice for them. And so they adopted it. They did some PR mumbo jumbo around it, and they gave it some good catchphrases that people were able to just use in protesting, that made it easier for people to adopt without having to form actual arguments based on it.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't think you're honestly getting all that political. One of the things I kind of like discussing is that polarization happens on both sides, where um, you know Catholics are called to be political people, but our politics aren't just aligned with one party either. I would say they probably align more with one party than another, but we have issues where there's disagreements about like IVF being one of them, for example. On a lot of people on the right are in support of IVF. That's not a Catholic position, and you kind of have to balance those things up when making a voting decision.
Yep. Yeah, there's quite a
I'll
few.
leave it out of the podcast, but I think there's definitely like one that aligns more with the Catholic position than other. I think there's a party that prays publicly and a party that publicly bashes praying. But besides that, like there's definitely some discernment to do when it comes with your vote, and not just blindly accepting a party because of it.
Well, and not just with your vote, but with also with the other things that you can do, like even just having a platform and saying, I did vote for this person, this party, but
You can
Here's
disagree with them.
why the death penalty is wrong. Here's what the church's stance is on it. Here's why we believe what we believe, and kind of pushing back on your own party and saying, here's some things we have to consider, and really appealing to those people and making your voices heard, because our voices are not just heard in our voting. Obviously, that's the most obvious and that's the most impactful, probably, is what you actually vote for. But there's a lot of things that you can do to show your party that you don't agree with those nuanced things and those specific policies that you're not specifically voting for. I would love that if they could just say, here's all the things that we are going to be putting on this ballot. Vote for your
Yeah.
picks, and
And
I would
we'll,
say yes, no, yes,
and
no,
we'll actually do it,
right?
We won't just say we'll do it, we'll actually do it. But
Yeah. But there's a lot of ways
yeah,
to
and that goes back to your earlier conversation of making sure Christ is at that highest aim rather than, a political party or a political figure. And, you can disagree with those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last kind of question about your platform. I find it, and I've been doing this for a very short period of time, but I've really tried to keep it on my heart and mind to have good intention while doing it. And I've seen some personal growth myself. What's been one of the ways that you've grown personally by doing your social ministry in a way?
I think one of the best things for me has been around my patience with others, in having a platform and having other people seeing how you respond, seeing how you speak. You do have to hold yourself to a very high standard, which we should all of the time anyway. But if you have eyes on you, if you have ears listening to what you say, it causes you to really think twice and to discern and to show patience and restraint in times that you maybe would react. You could probably attest to this, but being a passionate person, sometimes things just come out of your mouth. And then you're like, ooh, I don't know if that was quite out of love or if that was really with bad intentions, in an intention out of anger, out of spite, out of, whatever it is towards the other side. I think my conversion also did that, right? If I wasn't a convert, if I didn't previously have the thoughts and ideas that I had before I converted, I don't know if I would have as much patience as I do with Protestants when they come to my page and they say slander the church and they do horrible personal attacks towards me. And it helps me that I'm able to say, I used to be you. I used to think just like you. And I used to say some of the same things that you're saying, and I need to give you patience because you are me 10 years ago. And it's my platform has just helped me do that too, of being like, these are the other young, impressionable people who are watching how I'm going to respond to this. And how do I want them to respond to it when they get faced with the same thing? My children it's the same, right? It's all the same. How do I want my children to respond to this situation that I'm experiencing? And I have to step up and I have to do that, or else I'm literally teaching them to do with my actions, to do something that's different than what I'm verbally telling them to do. And that's just like the age old saying, like, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work, right? That never works.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I feel with my nieces as being their godfather. Is I feel that in many ways they've already helped me more than I've helped them, because I want to be that reflective light for them, the cleanest slate I can be, so that Christ's light can reflect off of me and that they can best see Christ in me and live that way.
Exactly.
You extrapolate that past, my nieces into an audience and to my friends and all that, and you have the heavy weight on you, but it's a weight that you willingly carry around because it makes everyone around you better, makes you better as well. And you mentioned the patience. And it's funny how you mentioned the kind of how God used your conversion to build that patience. I've always said that being a cradle Catholic myself was God's way of, knocking down my pride. Because I feel like if I converted, I would hold so much pride in the fact that, like, I I got there on my own. Like, I would be like, yeah, I'm the smartest. I found it out, but just being born into it and then finding out the fullness of the truth in the faith, I'm like, I really did nothing to deserve this. And
Well, that's
I
one
can't
way to
hold
look
you
at it.
accountable.
I've never
So it's
thought of
funny,
it like that.
so it's funny how God works in those different ways for individuals. Just a few more questions. I know you're busy. You mentioned you're married. Do you have any advice for the following groups? And I'll let you go one at a time. The first of which is any couples discerning marriage, and this could be they're in a relationship discerning marriage, or they're single and they're discerning if married life is for them. Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, I would say really look into what marriage is. You need to fully understand what you're doing and look at the church's teaching around it. It is not the same type of marriage or the same type of contract as what the rest of the world is thinking that marriage is. So you need to understand what you're really doing. It's not a contract. It's not anything about how you're filing your taxes. Those are all secular. And there is divorce doesn't even need to be an option in your mind. It needs to be completely off of the table without exceptions. You don't need to say, I used to say before I was Catholic, I used to say, well, I would never get divorced unless my husband cheated on me. And then I would. And then I'd leave him. And then you're like, no, no, no. Like, I'm sorry. I know that's really hard and very controversial to say, but that's not a good excuse. And that's not a reason to get divorced because you're making it's different, right? You're committing to something different. It's a sacrament. It's not just a commitment. It is a commitment. It's the highest commitment that there is, but it's not just a commitment. And so just really truly understanding what you're doing when you get married, and then also looking for the virtues in the other person, and also all of the foundational things. I mentioned this earlier, is like these big conversations, these big topics, these big decisions, my husband and I, my boyfriend at the time, before we even got engaged, we were having these types of conversations. And it's things that you need to be aligned on before you get in too deep. Because people don't have these conversations early enough where I'm not talking about first date, right? Like maybe a little bit after that. You can see if there's any chemistry before on the first date. If you even like talking to the person, that's great. But once you get any amount into it at all, then you really need to start thinking like, okay, let's have these big conversations before I fall in love with this person and before I stop caring about these things and care more about them as a person.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful, right? Like that's beautiful. But you need to prioritize the foundational things and the virtues of a person before you fall in love with them so that you can make a good decision to walk away if you need to.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. It's almost like beating the infatuation with what's already infallible, which is beating that infatuation with the person with what you know to be true and need to hold to make sure those things align first. I like that. That's good. Do you have any advice for couples who are newly married?
Yes, yes. The one that comes to mind is sorry, hold on one second. My husband's walking and he's a stomper.
For those listening, we paused because of some husband stomping. So the stomping is one of the things you have to work on in marriage, I assume.
Yes. It's quite loud around here. But I was going to say, I think
Any advice for newly married couples?
the thing that comes to mind is just to guard your unity. I know a lot of people, when they first get married, they're bringing things into their marriage, friendships or habits that they may have done before getting married, especially if they did it right and not living together and not, doing any of that stuff in their engagement, which we didn't. So for some people who are living together for years, it might not be such a drastic change, but if you're doing it the right way, you're literally moving into a home or an apartment with somebody that you never have before, who has different ways of doing things. And for me, I'd never lived with a man before. He had never lived with a woman before. We have different standards of cleanliness. We have different standards of how we do things, right? To guard your relationship above all. So if that is relationships that you've had previously with friends who are girls, guard that. Guard the relationship when it comes to your parents or your siblings and like leaving your parents and clinging to your wife, right? Like that relationship is now the most important relationship in your life, and you need to actively guard it daily with your daily choices, whether that is as simple as respecting them in cleaning up after yourself and not leaving them to do everything, and all the way to if your wife and your mother disagree on something, know where I'm going with this, right? It's guarding that relationship the best that you can. And also, of course, to always pray together. That's
Yeah, there's a lot of studies on that.
There is. They've done
The
so
power.
much research on it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
The closer
That's
that you
awesome.
are to God, the closer that you'll be to your partner.
Yeah,
And so,
I've seen that like in like a diagram before of like a triangle where like you're moving up the triangle closer to like the pinnacle, and yeah, I've always liked that diagram.
and I know a lot of couples that pray separately and have really good prayer lives, but it is really important to pray together.
Yeah, I've never thought about that.
It's very important. My husband and I do it every day on multiple occasions, but always before we go to bed. And it's just such a beautiful thing to share with each other.
Yeah, I would have assumed the. I'm glad you mentioned that because I would have assumed the prayer life independently would almost lack in a lot of marriages. Because like I can imagine if I get married, and I put if just because being a man, that vocation of like priesthood still out there and things like that, but that I feel like my inclination would be to have almost all my prayer be with my spouse, and that personal prayer life almost kind of dwindle away. But I imagine that's probably not very positive either. You kind of
No.
need both.
No, and it's also like not as realistic, just based on like daily life. So if you're only praying when you're with your spouse and you're only with your spouse at certain times of the day, then you're not praying for like huge portions of the rest of the day. So I know a lot of people pray on their way to work in the car. One of my girlfriends, her and her husband were both teachers, and they would actually call each other as they were both driving to work and pray together, which I thought was very cute and beautiful. But a lot of people don't have that ability or that schedule. They're not, doing that at the same time. So a lot of people pray alone there. But yeah, I mean, we should be praying ceaselessly, which my husband has brought that to our marriage. Of he has a wonderful and beautiful and very strong prayer life. And he's helped me with mine. But yeah, it's very important to do all
Is
the
there
time.
any prayer you kind of gravitate more towards? Would you care sharing that?
He and I are both converts, and so we are probably most comfortable with like spontaneous prayer of just
All
like
right.
chatting it up with God.
I call it freestyling.
Yeah, but of course we do have like our our prayers that we do every night with our kids before bed. We do Hail Marys, we do our fathers, and we do a St. Michael's prayer, which St. Michael that's our church, and so we've gravitated towards that a lot. And then we'll mix it up here or there, but those are our main, and then we do a lot of the spontaneous praying as well.
That's awesome. What about couples preparing to welcome a child? So
Mm.
this could be, they're about to give birth, or it's a newborn baby. So what would you tell them?
I would say it's okay not to feel ready, and I don't think that you should wait to have children until you feel ready, because none of us are really ready and none of us really ever feel ready. I mean, some people might, but God really equips us as we go. It's not like something that you're just like, okay, I'm going to wait until, and then I'm going to do. You might not ever get there, and you're missing out on the most beautiful thing. The transition into parenthood is beautiful and stretching regardless. You will never be fully ready, and you will never do it perfectly. And that is okay. If that feels more like self reliance and not really like trusting in God. So don't wait until you're ready. Don't wait until the finances look perfect. Don't wait until you're in the perfect home or the perfect situation, because is really about control, and it's not about like trusting what the Lord has in store for you.
Yeah, I'm grossly unqualified on the subject, but what I've noticed is people tend to rise to the occasion when it is necessary. So people have kids, and then all of a sudden their income increases because they're just found a way. They made a way. Haven't seen that, with like a relationship or like a child or anything like that, but I've seen it in other aspects of my life, and I can imagine that's only tenfold when it comes to a life that you've given life to, rather, for lack of better words. Now, I watched one of your recent videos. You kind of called out my demographic. It was if you need motivation from someone who isn't a 22-year-old gym rat with no responsibilities. Although I like to think I have some responsibilities, but I saw that video when I was 21, so clearly you weren't talking about me.
Never.
So it's okay. I won't be too offended. Um, you gave some motivation regarding, like putting on your tennis shoes, going out for a walk. Are there any, spiritual or or physical and mindset practices rather that help you grow spiritually? And if so, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about you have to take care of yourself spiritually and physically and emotionally, and you really have to try as hard as you can to be the best possible version for your as you can of yourself, because if you don't, not only will your children see that, but they will emulate that. If you eat a bunch of junk food, not only will that be in your home and therefore your children will have access to it, but they will also watch you eat that and they will eat that. And the same goes for like your physical health and your active lifestyle. If you yourself are living an active lifestyle, let's go on a walk, let's go to the park, let's go do this, and you're driving those active lifestyle, your children will automatically come along for the ride and will automatically be active as well, because especially for the first several years, you're the one who's driving all of those activities. If I say, hey, let's go to the park, hey, let's go on a walk, my daughter is going to always say yes and be excited, but I'm the one who's driving those things. Or if she's asking me, I'm the one who's saying yes or no. So I'm the deciding factor. So I have to decide the healthy thing, because if I don't, then she's not getting the healthy benefits.
Your answer just perfectly outlined what we were talking about earlier of like the inclinations of men versus women. I asked that question to guys, and it's like, so I can protect them, which is like their inclination. And you just gave that beautiful answer that would only come from a woman of like, I got to model it so I can nurture them, and that was beautiful. I love that answer, and I honestly haven't heard that approach enough. It's one that's not necessarily like uncommon, but one that's not just going to be reminded of at least, and I love that.
And I think that's why I framed that video the way that I did, is because for women, a lot of times they're motivated by what is good for their children, not
Yeah,
necessarily what is good for them. And so if you're saying, hey, if you won't do it for yourself, if you won't get up and move your body for yourself, you got to do it for them. And that oftentimes is all the motivation that a mother needs.
absolutely, absolutely. I just caught a stray in the occurrence of it. I'm joking. I'm joking. We're going to get into a new thing. I don't know how long this is going to last. You may be the first and the last guest to do it, so no pressure. But it'll be rapid fire questions. There's going to be 5 questions. I'm going to give you a minute. If it takes you over a minute, literally nothing happens. But you will be breaking the rules, which is not cool. So
Okay.
I'll count you into it. Are you ready, Karlie?
I am so ready.
Alrighty. I'll start it after I ask the first question. Who is your favorite saint? And if you had one day to spend with him or her, what would you ask or do?
Okay.
Okay.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay. My favorite saint, and when I say favorite, I mean the most impactful one for me personally, is JP2. We actually just had his feast day, but he is my favorite without question. His courage, joy, and love for the human person really changed the modern church and really changed the way that I viewed a lot of like very foundational things, a lot of his work. If I was going to spend a day with him, I would probably ask him how he maintained such peace, such a peaceful person in the middle of such chaos. In the time that he lived and the situations that he was dealing with were some of the most chaotic, and he just radiated hope. Okay, next.
What is the most controversial take you have on a Catholic topic?
I think Catholics don't realize that modern comfort has dulled spiritual hunger. You shouldn't always be comfortable. There's a reason why we don't drink coffee in Mass. And it's not just because we fast before the Eucharist. It's because you're not supposed to just be like super comfy in all things.
Awesome.
Penance, fasting, small mortifications, they're essential.
Awesome. What is one, this might be the same thing, but what is one modern habit that you believe most weakens people's faith?
Distraction.
Distraction.
As somebody on social media, I would say social media is a very big distraction for a day-to-day life, and it is very convenient and it's very attention grabbing, and that is sometimes not good for things like your prayer life.
Alrighty. Veil or no veil?
Okay, I was literally just talking with my girlfriend about this. Veiling is beautiful and so reverent. I personally don't veil in this time of my life because it's more of a distraction for my young kids who would be pulling it off of my head. Yes. I think it would be more of a distraction for me now, but I think it's so, so beautiful. When I see women veil, I just love it. Chef's kiss.
Awesome. Last one. What single virtue would you want to be remembered by, or your ministry to be remembered by?
Probably fortitude, courage,
Two.
standing for the truth, hopefully with grace, but with conviction, and never shying away from fully declaring what it is that I believe.
Awesome. Well, that was the end of the rapid fire round. I might keep it. You did pretty well. So before we get a little over a minute, but we'll count it. I won't say the exact time. Maybe if someone wanted to do that out there they're listening to it, they can. But then you'll hear about it in the comments. But you won't hear about it from me. So there you go.
I'm a yapper. Hurry.
You do short form media. That's surprising.
And it's hard. It's really hard for me. I got to pare it down.
So I always ask the guests before they leave me if they have any suggestions for the audience, just whether that's book recommendations, podcasts, words of wisdom.
By John Steinbeck, Scott Hahn, or Trent Horn. Podcasts, I would say Epiphany by Father Peyton Plesla. All the podcasts that Father Mike Schmitz does, especially if you're younger and need that kind of like quick form. And then, yeah, those are the ones that I really like to recommend a lot. I
started off with Father Mike Schmitz. That was my guy at first, like in high school, whenever I got like those first Catholic answers. And I was like, man, what do I do?
Yeah.
You go search for Father Mike Schmitz video.
For the girls of the group, I would say my girlfriend's podcast, What in the Dang Heck, is great for like daily life, and two really great Catholic women. And then for the dads of the group, I was just on the Catholic Dad Pod, and those are two fantastic podcasts that are just real world people just talking through daily life as Catholics.
It's awesome. And where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram or TikTok, Kindred in Kairos, and yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Would you mind closing this off in prayer?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, thank you so much for a wonderful and fruitful conversation. We pray for all of those that are listening to us, that you just fill them with a peace and joy, and a spirit of just really trying to understand what it is that you want out of their lives and their purpose, and that they draw closer towards you. We love you so much, dear Father, and we thank you for your sacrifice and your love for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you joining me. It was amazing to have you.
Thanks so much, Tyler.